The pressure, the pressure is on. My name is Kelly. I'm an alcoholic. And anyway, I sobered up the day before Thanksgiving, 1982. In about, let's see now, 11 more days, I'll be 80 years old on this earth. And I'll tell you what, I'd be remiss if I didn't wish. We were talking about birthdays, and I want to wish Alcoholics Anonymous happy birthday. Happy 87 years. Can you believe that? Oh my God, it makes me cry. The self sacrifice that Dr. Bob and Bill uh, put into this program for us, the humility that they strive for. Humility is something that I strive for. I will never attain it. I will never get there. I remember one time I asked my sponsor. I says, "What is, how do I attain humility?" And he says, "Kelly," he says, "the way you start out getting humility is just be who you are and quit trying to be somebody else." And wow, but who was I? I had no idea who I was. And somebody was talking about the Pacific Group, and my sponsor always said that I sobered up at the Snake Pit, but I got my recovery in the Pacific Group. And everywhere that we went, and if we spoke together in that, he'd always tell people that. And I remember one time I ran away from my home group. I ran away from my home group, and I got in the car, and I wanted to go to Mecca. And so I went to Akron, Ohio. Okay. And I showed up there at their central office. There I was, this is Mecca. And anyway, they told me, they says, "Yeah, well, but probably a good idea for you to do until we get a hold of your sponsor and we send you back out there to California again. You might want to go to a meeting." And they sent me to this meeting, and it was called the Four Absolutes meeting in Akron, Ohio. And I met these five guys, they brothers, the Hicken brothers, up there in Akron, and they all had different days of sobriety, and they were all brothers in the same family. And they says, "Yeah, here's another thing we strive for besides humility, the four absolutes. We never attain it, but we always strive for it." And I found out in Akron, that's one of the things, one of the core things that they do. And they says, the first one is honesty. They says, "Now, because you're in kindergarten, this is what honesty that you need to work on a daily basis. Honesty. Who are you? To your inner self, to your inner self. Who are you, Kelly? Be honest with yourself, who you are." And it's in the big book. And I found it. I think I found it in one of the chapters, and it says, "Convinced of my innermost self that I'm an alcoholic. And there's not a darn thing I can do about it except one day at a time, come to meetings and be of service to others and work the steps, work the steps, work the steps." And I said, the other thing is that we try to attain, but we never get there, is unselfishness. And that means anybody, anytime comes to you and wants help, uh, uh, and they're an alcoholic, I want you to give them everything you've got. Give them everything you've got. And then the next one is love. And they says, we are the language of the heart. Whenever you're anywhere, you get in touch with your heart, and you come from your heart and you give love. You might not like everybody, but there's something in God's kids, and every one of God's kids, that you can find to like. And then the last one is purity. And they said purity. Okay. He says, this is going to be tough for you, because you have a destructive subconscious, and it's going to kill you, because you stay in your head. And I did. I used to stay in my head all the time. See, I have a disease where keys to my disease are locked on the inside of me, and you can't get to me. Okay. You can't get to me. No matter what you do, you can't get to me. But every once in a while, I can take that key inside of me and I can just open it up a little bit and let you in. And they says the main thing that you got to do on a daily basis, Kelly, and you got to keep this in your head all day long is gratitude. You got to make a gratitude list. And I just says, wow, I'm going back to California. This is too much for me. Well, if you've ever been to Akron, okay, and you go to central office, they have this big stained glass window right up in front, and it has the four absolutes right there on there. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. But anyway, I ran back to California, and anyway, like I said, I sobered up at a place called the Snake Pit, and I belonged there. I was bilingual. I spoke Bulgarian English, and I slid right in there. And boy, did I belong. And there was this little guy, and this little guy, his name was Merle, and Merle would talk louder than my head. And anyway, one day I came in, and he says, Kelly girl. I thought, oh no, not Merle, not Merle. Those old timers in a meeting. I go, not Merle. And I go, Merle, what do you want? He says, Kelly girl, what are you grateful for? I said, Merle, I'm not grateful for anything. He says, really, Kelly girl? He says, it's November. It's gratitude month in Alcoholics Anonymous. What are you grateful for? Merle, my children were taken away from me by the state of California. I'll never get them back again. He says, Kelly girl, you gave your children away every time you were out there in the streets and you were drinking and you were in the bars drinking and not taking care of your children. You were giving your children away. Now, Kelly, what are you grateful for? Earl, my husband got killed in a car accident by a drunk driver. He said, Kelly girl, your husband was a drunk driver. You and him drank together. You and him drank up the city. He says, let me ask you this. Oh, these crusty old timers. Oh my goodness. And he always knew a way to get to me. And he says, Kelly girl, let me ask you something. He says, do you have syphilis? No, of course I don't have syphilis. He says, okay. He says, here's a yellow pad and a pencil. He says, I want you to write this down. I'm grateful I don't have syphilis. He said, there's your first gratitude. Wow. And he says, now, Kelly girl, are you in a nut house or in jail, locked up in jail today? I says, no, Merle. He says, I want you to write that down, your second gratitude. I'm grateful I'm not in a nut house, and I'm grateful I'm not in jail today. He says, now, Kelly girl, did you murder anybody today? I said, Merle, it's only 7 o'clock in the morning. I know, write it down. I'm grateful I didn't murder anybody today, but I'm about to. And he says, now what I want you to do is I want you to take those gratitudes. And every time you go into one of your meetings and where you're in your own head and just in your own head and in your own head, he says, I want you to take those gratitudes out because you never listened to anything it said in the meeting anyway. And I want you to read those gratitudes over and over and over and over. And he says, and then I want you to put yet after them. He says, because if you go back out that door again, Kelly girl, those are your yets. If you make it back in. And boy, I'll tell you, I still do gratitudes today. I still do a gratitude list, and I sponsor sponsors. Okay, everybody that I sponsor, they have to get their service, and the first thing I have them do whenever I start sponsoring them is doing a gratitude list every morning, because that's the way I was taught. I was taught that way. And there was nobody in the Snake Pit that wanted to sponsor me. and the women didn't like me. Um, and they didn't like me at all. And I went to Merle, and Merle said, Kelly, did you get a sponsor? I says, Merle, none of the women like me here. He says, well, I got a flash for you, Kelly. The guys don't think too much of you either. Oh, anyway, I'm in there one day, and this little lady by the name of Eileen, she comes up to me and she says, Kelly, would you like to go to a meeting with me tonight? Somebody that wants to take me to a meeting? Oh, she says, and if you go to that meeting with me, I'll take you out for dessert afterwards. Oh my goodness. A friend, a friend, a friend. I didn't know how to be a friend because I was a taker. I was a taker. I didn't know then in order to have a friend, you had to uh, learn how to give and be a friend. I didn't know that. Nobody had told me, But I was so excited. I was going to go to a meeting with Eileen, and everybody loved her. Everybody absolutely loved her. And so I sat there all day long waiting for her, all day. And she showed up. Can you believe that? She showed up, and she took me to the women's club. It was real hoity-toity, I wasn't close. I wasn't, I, I just wasn't used to stuff like that, And she sat me in the front row, and she got away from me real quick, and I was sitting there by myself up in the front row. And anyway, this speaker got up that night, and I started to shut down, but he said something. He said that he had been in the Texas insane asylum and that he had escaped. Oh my goodness, I wanted to listen to what he had to say because the people in Downey, California were going to have me locked up. They said, you need to be locked up. You're crazy. You need to be on stuff that and put in a nut house, and they were trying to get the police to do that. In those days, there wasn't any treatment center. I sobered up right on the floor of Alcoholics Anonymous. I sobered up on the floor of the snake pit. Anyway, oh my goodness. And I started to listen to him. And then he said this. He says that after a while, he got all 5 of his children back, all 5 of them. Oh my goodness, I wanted to know how he did that. I was so excited. And then I was just listening to him, and he says, I've been on my job for 25 years. On the same job. I've been fired for 32 jobs before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh my goodness. And then I found out later that the way you keep a job is that you show up every day. Who would have thought? And then he said this. He says, and everywhere I go in the world, I walk into a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've got a lot of friends. Oh, friends. Oh, I wanted friends so bad. Oh my goodness. And I sat there and I listened to everything he said, and he gave me hope. I had hope that day. I had hope. I had hope. I had hope. I had hope. And you see, I had been starving my soul all my life because I had to have stuff, 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 stuff. If I had enough stuff, I'd be okay. If I had this, I'd be okay. And I was starving my soul. And the hope that he gave me, all of a sudden I felt this inside of me start to come alive. And after the meeting was over, he comes over to me, okay? And he goes, hey, kid, he said with love, he says, didn't anybody ever tell you that you're supposed to thank the speaker after they're through speaking? And I says, no, no, nobody's ever told me that. He says, oh, you're that girl. You're that one that nobody wants to sponsor. I thought, oh my goodness, I'm famous. I'm famous. This is wonderful. I'm famous. He says, okay, here's what we're going to do. He says, tomorrow morning, 11:15 exactly. Okay. He says, you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to dial 213-624-9258. And I did, because he gave me hope and I wanted to hear more. And anyway, I called that number and he picked up the phone and he had me come down to his work. It was down on Skid Row, LA. It's called the Midnight Mission. And I sat in front of his desk. Oh boy, I got chills talking about it. Okay. I sat in front of his desk and he says, kid, what's your biggest problem today? And I says, well, the people in AA are going to have me locked up in a nut house. And a lot, and I'm sober. I'm sober today. And he says, He says, well, I've got some good news for you. I said, really? Good news for me? He says, yes. He says, they don't lock people up in nut houses for being crazy like you. I said, they don't? He says, no. He says, it's only if you act crazy, they'll lock you up. So just don't act crazy and you'll never get locked up. Oh my goodness. This is, this is news. This is fabulous news, you know? And he says, what else? I said, well, I can't stay sober. He says, why not? And I said, because the state of California took my children away from me forever. And I don't know where in the world they are. And at night, all I do is lay there and wonder, are they being taken care of? Are they healthy? Are they happy? Where in the world are they? And I go through malls and I shopping malls and I look for kids about my kids' age and I look at them. I wonder if they're my children. And he says, well, guess what? He says, here's what you're going to do. He says, you're going to throw yourself with intensity into working with other girls that come in to Alcoholics Anonymous. You can help them better than their families. You can help them like nobody else can. He says, you're going to throw yourself into working with these girls. And I am going to promise you something, to the intensity that you're working with other people's children is the intensity that somebody is going to be taking care of your children. And I believed him. I believed him. And he says, and then you're going to start showing up at this little meeting, this little meeting on the West Side. And it was, in those days, it was held at the synagogue on Sunset Boulevard in Brentwood. And he says, and you're going to dress like a lady. And since you don't know how to talk yet, since you don't know how to talk properly yet, what I want you to do is just go out and put your hand up and say, hi, I'm Kelly. What is your name? And let them talk, because you got 2 ears and 1 mouth and you need to listen. And so I started doing that. And I started dressing like a lady, and I started going to my home group. And I'll tell you what, I just all of a sudden, I started noticing that everybody else in the group, my sponsor was taking them through their steps, and he wasn't taking me through the steps. And I went up to him and I says, hey, I says, you're taking all your other babies through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you've never taken me through the steps. He says, Kelly, you're so sick. He says, you're going to have to stay in service the rest of your life. I don't think the steps are even going to work for you. See, he knew how to work me, because whenever he said that, I thought, I'm going to show you. And I started going to 12-step meetings. I started reading the book. I started going to the meetings and listening to what people had to say. And all of a sudden, I took myself up through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I took myself through the steps. And anyway, one night I went up to him and I went up to him and I says, Nancy, He turned around, he looked at me, and all the lieutenants, were lined up around him, and anyway, they all start rolling their heads. Here comes the crazy lady. And anyway, he turned around and he looked at me. He says, "Kelly, what do you want?" I says, "I want you to know that I have worked the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous." He says, "Oh, you have you?" He's, and I said, "Yes." And I says, "And I want you to know that I think the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous are so fabulous that everybody in the world should work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous." And he looked at me and he says, "You know what, Kelly? The people in AA wish you would work the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous." And he turned around and walked away. And one of the things, one of the things um, I went to was I went to some speaker meetings, and one of the speaker meetings I went to, I had this friend of mine. She took care of the coffee bar at the Snake Pit, and one night she was. Her name was Luscious Lola, and one night she was speaking, and oh my goodness, I wanted to go and I wanted to hear her, and I went, and I sat there and I opened up my mind and I listened. And she said this because, see, I thought for being such a horrible, horrible mother and being thrown in, having 7 DUIs, uh, and being thrown in jail 14 times and drinking for 22 and a half years, and everything that I've been through, I thought I was a bad, 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 bad person, really bad person. And I didn't want anybody to know about, how bad I was. I didn't want anybody to know about it. And anyway, Luscious Lola got up there and she said these words. She said, "We are not bad people trying to get good." "We aren't?" She says, "No." He says, "We're sick people and we're all getting well together." And today I remained a patient. I remain a, uh, a passion in in these rooms, and I make sure that I stay right sized, right sized. I stay right sized by being in service. Boy, if you've ever been on a committee, let me tell you, uh-huh, you will get self self-sized, but believe me. But anyway, um, going further, my sponsor and I sat down, and he told me, he says, "The thing that you have to work on, Kelly, is contrary actions." Contrary actions. I said, "Contrary actions? What are those?" He says, "Because you're so sick, if you think that you should make a right, probably the better thing for you is to make the left." He says, "Now," he says, "you've got all 7 deadly sins, all of them." He says, "The one thing that you have," because I had to go get a career. I couldn't have those dumb little jobs that I was trying to cling on to. I had to go get a career, and I had to go to school, and I went to school. And oh, by the way, I just I became a real estate broker. That's what I did. And anyway, I had a lot of pride about that. Oh wow, look at me. And he says, one thing, he says, that you've got a problem with is pride. He says, "You've got a lot of pride." He says, "The contrary action on pride is humility." He says, "Let me tell you something. You keep up stuff like that, you'll get humiliated." But he says humility is something you need to strive for. And he says greed. He says, uh, with greed, what we're talking about is being generous of the spirit, of the spirit. As you're feeling this, you're making your soul healthy. Uh, that's the time to give it away. The more you give it away, the more you'll get it. He says, and in lust, he says, "I don't want you corrupting any of the men in Alcoholics Anonymous, okay? I want you staying away from the men in Alcoholics Anonymous." He says, "That's so important that you throw yourself into working with other women." He says, "And then just what watch what happens to them whenever they get into relationships and say, boy, am I grateful I didn't do that. And he says, anger. He says, your contrary actions on anger is to get away from it, disengage, and breathe and do nothing. He says, that way you don't have to worry about waking up with an emotional hangover anymore, like I used to. And he says, gluttony. He says, gluttony. He says, Kelly, there's enough. There's enough in here. There's enough out here for you. Okay. You don't have to be so gluttony and envy. He says, be grateful for what you have, um, and keep my eye on myself and try and be in a better person each day, and don't worry about what other people have or what they're doing. Be grateful for what and happy for them. And then the last one is sloth. And he says, boy, in your case, you need to clean house, and you need to clean your car, and you need to stay and have some discipline in your life. And today, I have never attained any of these, but I worked towards them. I work towards them. I think I'll always have my character defects, but I work towards them on a daily basis. Each day I try to be a little bit better than I was yesterday. And anyway, what happened was being in real estate, okay, and not being allowed to date. Uh, I decided, without talking to my sponsor, of course, I decided to put an ad in the LA Times. I said, feisty redhead. In those days, I had red hair. Feisty redhead would like to be in a 12-step relationship. That's what I was honest, right? Oh boy, did the letters like it. Oh my goodness. And I mean, and then I got this one letter, and it was from somebody that sent me a glamour shot of himself. And he says, I'm in a 12-step program too. Call me if you want. And I thought, wow, I'm going to call him, you know. And I picked up the phone. I called him. He answered. He answered on the first ring. And I asked him, I says, what little meeting do you go to? And he says, well, I'm a grateful member of Al-Anon. Manna from heaven. Oh my goodness. And I met him at the Bellflower Big Book, and I got out in front of all the greeters, okay, because Bellflower Big Book had the most gorgeous women that you'd ever want to see in your life. I mean, they were absolutely gorgeous and dressed understated elegance. You know, they were beautiful. But I got out in front of all of them, and all of a sudden I saw this big Cadillac coming down the road, and this guy gets out of the car and he shoots his cuffs, and he had a pompadour, and he had I mean, oh my goodness, my heart, you know, I have atrial fibrillation now, but my heart was just beating out of my chest. And I ran over to him and I say, hey, hi, I'm Kelly. He says, I'm Mike. And I says, come on in. And I took him in there, and I had a bunch of guys that kind of hung around together called the Dog on the Roof and the Bellflower Big Book. And I took him over to him and I says, hey, everybody, this is Mike, you know. And they says, yeah, Kelly, just leave him here and you go away. I said, okay. And as I'm turning around and walking away, they're going, run, run, get away from her as quick as you can. Well, you don't tell an Al-Anon that, and they run, they fall in love. And Mike fell in love with me, and we started dating. And anyway, Mike and I have been married. Last Sunday, we were married for 30 years. Thank you. One man, I was married. I mean, I've been married for 30 years to one man. Can you believe it? Oh, anyway, the day that I was going to get married, my sponsor was going to walk me down the aisle, and I was all dressed in white. I wanted to wear a white dress, you know, and I had 12 bread, you know, and I overdo, you know, I had to overdo everything, you know, and Anyway, he says, I said to him, so I'm standing there, uh, ready to walk down the aisle, right? I says, I see, I don't think I want to do this. He looked at me and he says, Kelly, if you don't walk down this aisle with me, I'm going to throw you down the aisle, okay? He said, with love. I said, okay. So anyway, we went on a honeymoon to Honolulu. And let me tell you something, there was like about 350 people at our wedding. And they were just the most beautiful people, all kinds of people from every walk of life. And they were just the most beautiful people in the world in the wedding. And anyway, whenever I got back from the honeymoon, I realized that I had made a mistake. And so I went down to see him and said, look, I made a big mistake. I need to get out of this. And he says, what's the problem? And I says, oh, I tell you, he is so sick. And he says, oh, really? He says, well, let's take this yellow pad. Here comes another yellow pad, right? And he puts it in front of me and he says, okay, put his name on top. I said, okay, Mike. He says, okay, make a list of everything that you don't like about him. Oh boy, did I. I had a list. Let me tell you something. I had a list. Okay. And finally he said, are you through? And I says, yeah, I think so. He says, okay, read those off to me. And I did. I read every one of them off to him. He says, okay, here's what we're going to do. I says, okay. He says, we're going to take and we're going to cross his name off the top of this list. I said, okay. I still wasn't getting it. I'm not that smart. And he says, and then we're going to put your name on top of this list. My name on top of this list. He says, yeah. He says, because if you spot it, you got it. Those are all your character defects. And he says, now I want you to go home and I want you to keep your eyes off of Mike. And because Mike has a good sponsor, her name's um, uh, Vanoy. And she has a, thank you, everyone. Anyway, he's got a good sponsor. And what you need to do is keep your eyes on yourself. And I want you to work on every one of these character defects on yourself. Oh my goodness, you guys, you know what happened? As I'm working those on myself, Mike just straightened right up. Oh my goodness. And then he was going to this lady named Pat Allen. I'm sure nobody here knows her, but she at that time had 42 years in the program. She was a doctor of um, psychiatrist that specialized in relationships, and he and I had never had a relationship that lasted or did anything. And so he was going to her, and naturally I was in service AA, and so one day I got invited, and I went to one of his little things. And Pat put me up right in the middle of everybody, and she says, okay, um, now, Kelly, if you were to go and get rid of Mike, what kind of guy would you be looking for? I said, well, the one thing about Mike, he can't dance. He has no rhythm whatsoever. I would look for somebody that could dance because I'm a dancing fool. I love to dance. She says, okay, what percentage of your life do you spend dancing? I says, oh, maybe 5%. She says, okay, so you take somebody that's probably 75 to 85% perfect for you, like Mike, and you'd get rid of them for somebody that's 5% good for you? Kelly, you're a businesswoman. That just doesn't make any business sense. And all of a sudden, she had me. And I'll tell you, some days like today, Mike was 85% wonderful for me. And I'll tell you what, I with these people in Alcoholics Anonymous have taught me how to be a good wife. Now, about 6 or 7 years ago, I invited my sponsor out to speak at my home group here in Florida called Treasure Island Steppers. And anyway, he came out, and you never want to sit like in the first couple rows, where he can see you when you're in a meeting, because I had to, because I had to send pass the basket up in front. And anyway, he all of a sudden stopped and he says, "Everybody, see that young lady right there? Her name's Kelly." And everybody turned around and looked at me. He says, "I gave that lady away in marriage to Mike 25 years ago. And for 25 years, Mike's been trying to give her back to me." And oh my God, the laughter and the fun that we've had together in Alcoholics Anonymous, I miss him. I miss him dearly. I miss him dearly. But he's one of my heroes. So of course I talk about it. But anyway, Mike got transferred to Florida, and to show that I'd go to any length to stay married to him, I came out to Florida too. But you guys, in the middle of the night, I'd wake up and think about those babies. And, I had a beautiful family in Alcoholics Anonymous. I had everything fulfilled in me, sponsoring all these women. They let me be a part of their lives, and I was so grateful. And one day I was holding an open house, and anyway, it was 2nd of August, and talk about heat. Okay, there was 135 degrees coming out of this designer driveway, and it was on a 42-degree trajectory, and my Cadillac was parked right there in that. And as I'm picking up the signs for my open house, I hear this big bang, and I look up, and it's my Cadillac coming at me like a freight train. And I tried to get out of the room, out of the way, and I didn't. And it caught my left leg, and it pulled me under the undercarriage, and it smashed my left hand leg, did a tib on the right, rolled up my body, pulled my something out of the sternum, my rib cage, and then crushed my lungs. And at that moment, I says, I know, that it's going to run over my head, and this is the last conscious thought I'm ever going to think in my life. And thank you, God, and thank you, AA. I've had everything I've ever wanted, everything I've ever wanted in AA. And it's been a wonderful life, and I was ready to go, and it ran over my head. And I ended up in Bayfront Hospital, and I was dying, or I died. They brought me back to life, okay? And anyway, I was in there, and whenever I got home, after 6.5 weeks, I was in a wheelchair, and I got this phone call from California that they wanted me to come and speak for Bud McDonald's 50th anniversary, because Bud and I put together the first ever women and children's recovery home in the world in Whittier, California. It's called the Foley House. And I says, "Oh, Sandy," I said, "I can't." I said, "I'm a gimp now." I says, "I can't." She says, "Kelly, you used to sponsor me, and you told me one time, whatever you were asked to do in Alcoholics Anonymous, you would do." She said, "Because you were so grateful." She says, "So, do you have a computer?" I said, "Yes, I do." She says, "Get on your computer and ask them for an e-ticket. And whenever you get your ticket, tell them that you're a gimp. When you get to the airport, they'll put you in the front of the line." She hung up on me. I never remember being that cruel to her, just hanging up on her, but she did. And I went to my computer. In those days, it was these big computers, and I went on there, and I got myself an e-ticket. And they said, go to your email, it'll be there. And I went on the email, and after 6.5 weeks, I had all kinds of emails, but all of a sudden one just stopped me dead. and it was from somebody with my son's birth name. And I stopped and I clicked on it, and this is what it said. Did I find you? Is this you? Oh, and I wanted him to know that I'm a good woman today. I wanted him to know that. And I emailed him right back and I says, yes, you found me. And I want you to know that I'm almost 20 years sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he emails me right back and he says, well, I want you to know that I'm almost 6 months sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh my goodness. And I said, well, I'm going to be on off the computer, the big computer for a while because I have to fly out to Los Angeles to speak at this at James Hall in Norwalk at this guy's. And he says, and I didn't know where in the universe my children were. And my son says, while after you've spoken there in Norwalk, get in your rent a car and come on down to the Newport Alano Club. I'll be waiting for you. And you guys, when I drove down Newport Boulevard, came to 32nd, there's this hyper kid walking on the corner. And I know that's my boy. That's my boy. And I pulled over to the curb and I leaped out of the car with that, best I could with that walker. And I put my arms around him. Oh, and I haven't let go, And anyway, we went we went for a bowl of soup, and he says, look, he says, I'd like to have a relationship with you. He says, but your daughter loves you. And if you think that you're going to get to me through me to her, let's just end this right now. I said, Tim, I'll take what I can get. I says, no, you can trust me, And so anyway, I'm on the 405 and I'm on my way back to LAX to come back to Florida, and my cell phone rings. In those days you could answer it. And I answered it, and it was a young lady. She says, is this Terry? I said, yes, it is. And she said, well, this is your daughter, Tracy. And before you go back to wherever you came from, we need to talk. And we met at a restaurant, and we pulled the walls down between us. And I was so emotional whenever I left there. I forgot to ask her if she wanted my contact information, but through modern technology on the cell phone, the cell phone, I had her phone number. So I pushed the button and she picked up immediately. And I said, Tracy, I don't know if you want to keep in contact with me. She says, I'm so glad you called. Before you go back to Florida, would you like to meet your grandbabies? Yeah, 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 yeah. And I met Blake and Warren. I left my heart in California. And I got back here, and my sponsor here says, you got to go back, baby. You can't put that family back together here. You've got to go back. And I did. I sold everything in one day. The waterfront condo, everything. It was gone, all the furniture, everything. I had two little suitcases, one for Mike, one for me, a little cat named Tiger and a little dog named Slugger. And that's what I had. And then I thought, I wonder how I'm going to explain this when my husband gets home today. Thank goodness he works a good program. Oh my God. So anyway, we go back to LA, and I mean, we just have two suitcases, and we have a dog and a cat. Okay, no job, no place to stay, nothing. But we get to LAX, and we get there, and we are praying, and we're doing the 11th step, and we're praying, and we knew that everything's going to work out okay, and it did, everything did. And anyway, my daughter told me, she says, look, she says, I had a fabulous mother and a father. She says, and the best that me and you will ever be is at friends. I said, Tracy, I can be a friend. I know how to be a friend because you've taught me how to be a friend. You taught me to be as good as my word, to show up whenever I'm going to show up, to give more than I take, you taught me how to do that. And so that's what I did. I did the 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous with my family, and they didn't know I was doing them, but I was doing 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. And anyway, uh, my daughter was suffering from a disease. It's called anorexia neurosis. And she says that people told her all of her life that she was just like her mother and she couldn't nourish herself. And anyway, she was going to a church called Saddleback. Some guy named Rick was had something that could help her and her friends. They were having this weekend seminar. And oh, by the way, I had to get service sponsors too. And my service sponsor, her name is Lucretia, and her husband John, and they were my service sponsors. And they taught me how to do events. They told me how to be a GSR. They taught me how to do service. Today I'm in service. I'm a chair of the PICPC for Pinellas County. Anyway, going forward now. Anyway, they said, Tracy, you've got to show up for this seminar this weekend. And so she did at church, and they put her up in the front row, and this couple comes out, and they said, this is a weekend of forgiveness. Does anybody have somebody that they just can't forgive? And her friends pushed her up on stage. And so the lady sat her down and says, who is it that you can't forgive? And she says, it's my birth mother. She's a monster. She ought to be locked up somewhere, never be allowed to be out again. And they says, well, you never, never, never have to have anything to do with your birth mother. But would you like to get over this? She says, oh, yes, it's killing me. Please, please. And anyway, this lady says, okay, here's how we start. What is your birth mother's name? She said, Teresa Kelly. And the lady stopped and looked at her and says, Teresa Kelly from Downey, California? And my daughter says, yeah. She says she started crying. And this lady says to her, oh, in your case, you've got to get hold of your mother. She's been looking for you for a long, long time. Loved ones. Who that couple was. The way God works, huh? Who that couple was my service sponsors, Lucretia and John. They were doing the seminar on forgiveness that weekend, and my daughter was there. And so anyway, I says, oh my goodness, and I says, Tracy, I'll be a friend, I'll do my best. So anyway, um, she looked at me and she says, I've got to ask you to do something for me, and it's real important to me. I says, anything, anything. I thought, God, if it's $1 million, I guess I'll have to go out and sell a few more houses. She says, what I need you to do is forgive me. I says, forgive you? She says, yeah, all the time I called the FBI and tried to have you locked up. Every time I called the police whenever I knew you were out on the streets and had you locked up. You've got to forgive me. You've got to forgive me. I put my arms around my daughter and I held her head right here, just very gently held her head right here. And I says, oh, my beautiful, beautiful daughter, I forgive you. And I start thinking, I says, not only do I forgive her, I forgive people far away, people near around me. I forgive people from my past. I forgive them all. Anybody in the future you want to mess over me, you're already forgiven. Okay, you're already forgiven, because I got these tickets. My sponsor says to have them with me. They're called free passes. Free passes. Free passes. Let's give out free passes. Somebody cuts you off in traffic, give them a free pass. wave and smile, and don't let it bother you. Just like Sandy Beach says, uh, don't let anything disturb you. Be the most undisturbed person um, in the room. And anyway, I'm going to end now. I'm going to end now. I'm going to bring it to an ending. 2 weeks ago, I got to go to my grandson's graduation from Arizona State University. And the whole family was there together. Our whole family was there together for that graduation. And my grandson says to me, Grandma, it took me, 9 years to graduate from college. I said, honey, you're doing better than I did. It took me 42 years to graduate. And anyway, um, there we were all together, and anyway, my daughter, whenever I was about to leave and come home, she put her arms out and she hugged me, and she told me, she says, Mom, she called me Mom. She says, Mom, I love you. And that whole, it filled right up. It filled right up. And let me tell you something, my grandkids think I'm the greatest grandma in the world. They call me Grandma ATM. Please don't judge me. Okay, I do what I got to do. But anyway, I love you people. I love you so much. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you.